You're sitting in traffic on a warm, sunny Los Angeles morning. It's February 1942. Glenn Miller's A String of Pearls is playing on the radio. Palm trees line the streets. It's gonna be a good day. But that night, you're ripped out of bed as air raid sirens cut through the quiet night. You throw open the curtains, searchlights sweep across the sky, and then you hear it. Anti-aircraft cannons firing over the city. More than 1,000 shells are fired at a target in the sky. When morning comes, nothing belonging to the enemy has fallen. Nothing. So what were they shooting at? On the morning of February 26, 1942, readers across Southern California opened their newspapers to an image that would come to define the event. Published in the Los Angeles Times, the photograph showed multiple searchlight beams converging high above the city. At the point where the beams intersected, a pale shape appeared suspended within the light. It didn't glow on its own. It was visible only because the searchlights were lighting it up. To some viewers, the photograph showed a solid object caught in the beams. To others, it showed smoke and exploding shells. The contrast heightened during printing so the image would reproduce clearly on newsprint. The photograph quickly became more than documentation, and eventually one of the most iconic images of the Battle of Los Angeles. For those who had not experienced the barrage themselves, the photograph became the closest thing to evidence that night would leave behind. As the rest of the day unfolded, residents began learning what had actually happened during the night. Radar contacts offshore, blackout orders across the city, searchlights sweeping across the sky, and anti-aircraft batteries firing for nearly an hour over Los Angeles. By early 1942, the Pacific War had already reached the American mainland. The day before the event, a Japanese submarine, the I-17, surfaced off the coast of Santa Barbara and fired shells into the Elwood oil field. The damage was minor, but the psychological shift wasn't. For the first time since the War of 1812, the continental United States had been attacked. Coastal defenses tightened overnight. Radar stations scanned the Pacific. Blackout discipline became routine. Anti-aircraft guns stood ready on surrounding hills. Military commanders were already expecting another strike. Under wartime standing orders, air defenses were authorized to engage unidentified aircraft approaching a defended city during blackout conditions. Los Angeles was prepared to see something. It just didn't know what. 11 weeks earlier, the attack on Pearl Harbor had shattered the illusion of distance. War was no longer far away. It was right offshore. Hollywood still filmed, restaurants still opened, traffic still moved beneath palm trees. But the city lived differently now. Windows were darkened, streetlights were shut off, and cars crept through the night with hooded headlights and covered chrome to keep the city invisible from the air. Even a cigarette glow could draw a reprimand. At night, the skyline disappeared. The city of angels became the city of shadows. The first warning didn't come from an air raid siren. It came from a radar screen. Shortly after 2 a.m. on February 25th, coastal radar operators detected something offshore. Faint returns and uncertain echoes. Contacts that appeared, faded, then appeared again. No scheduled aircraft matched the signals, and no friendly planes were expected. Operators watched as minutes passed. The contacts seemed to drift along the coast, not approaching directly, not departing, lingering. At 2:15 a.m., alerts began moving through coastal defense channels. The darkness over Los Angeles now carried a message. Something might be coming. 10 minutes later, air raid sirens tore through the sleeping city. The sound cut through neighborhoods like a wave through still water. People were ripped from sleep, terrified. Curtains shifted as residents peered into the night. Outside, the streets remained empty. As searchlights swept the coastline and the skies above, military observers watched the horizon as reports circulated of lights moving over the ocean. Just after 3 a.m., tension stretched across the city. At 3:16 a.m., the first anti-aircraft shells were fired. Concussion after concussion rolled across the basin, echoing off hillsides and storefront glass, rattling ceilings and picture frames on bedroom walls. Telephone calls flooded police and emergency lines. Dogs began barking across the city. Some residents stepped outside despite blackout orders, drawn by the glow of explosions. Others tried to leave the city. Traffic accidents followed in the confusion. By morning, at least 5 civilians would be reported dead, most from heart attacks brought on by the fear and panic of the barrage. Nothing had attacked Los Angeles that night, yet people died. At 4:14, the ceasefire order was given, and in an instant the city fell silent. Eyewitnesses later described a form where the searchlights converged. In the beams, it looked like a red lozenge, a small red oval. It didn't dive, it didn't move, and it didn't streak away. It just stayed there while the bombardment continued. Observers waited for the usual signs of aerial combat: smoke, debris, a falling aircraft. More than 1,400 shells were fired into that sky, yet nothing fell. How does sustained fire on a visible target produce nothing? They had to have hit it. Dawn arrived quietly. Shrapnel lay scattered across sidewalks and courtyards, twisted fragments of anti-aircraft shells that had fallen back to Earth. In some places, unexploded shells were discovered as well, dangerous reminders that not every round fired had detonated. Across the city, the evidence was unmistakable. The debris of the military's own anti-aircraft fire littered the streets. There was nothing to show an attack had occurred. In the days following the barrage over Los Angeles, reports moved quickly up the chain of command. Radar logs, searchlight reports, artillery summaries, eyewitness accounts from across the city. Responsibility for regional defense fell under Western Defense Command, led at the time by Lieutenant General John L. DeWitt. And the reports didn't stop with him. They continued upward to the Army Chief of Staff, General George C. Marshall. On February 26th, Marshall transmitted a memorandum to President Franklin D. Roosevelt summarizing what occurred over Los Angeles. The document acknowledged radar contacts, visual observations, and sustained anti-aircraft fire. Something was there. They saw it, they fired at it. But it also confirmed no enemy aircraft destroyed, no wreckage recovered, no captured personnel, no debris belonging to a hostile force. Instead, the memorandum referred to unidentified aircraft observed over Los Angeles. Plural. If enemy aircraft had been present, where had they gone? If targets had been observed, why had none been hit? If radar detected contacts, what vanished before daylight? What had the United States military fired at for nearly an hour? Possible explanations were noted. High-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, weather balloons misidentified under searchlight glare, atmospheric conditions producing visual confusion. Within hours of the event, public explanations began to diverge. The Army suggested the weather balloons and misidentified targets. The Navy indicated that no Japanese aircraft had been operating in the area. Statements shifted, interpretations varied. The event would later be called the Battle of Los Angeles, but it was not recorded as a victory or a defeat or a false alarm. To this day, the event remains unsolved. By the end of February, life in Los Angeles was already returning to routine, but the memory of that night didn't disappear. Residents remembered the sirens, the barking dogs, the thunder rolling across darkened neighborhoods, the searchlights fixed on something no one could fully describe. Newspapers moved on to other headlines, yet the questions lingered. What had radar detected offshore? What had searchlights illuminated above the basin? What had anti-aircraft batteries fired on for nearly an hour? Why did nothing fire back? At senior command levels, reports didn't describe a single object. They summarized unidentified aircraft. Plural. Yet no enemy force was ever confirmed. No attack on the city was ever documented. So what do we call a night when the United States military opened sustained fire on unidentified targets? Targets that hadn't attacked the city and never returned fire. Targets that remain unidentified to this day. What was over Los Angeles that night?